Hey guys, Damien here. As I continue to interview the top MSPs in the world, one thing has become incredibly clear. It's time that we let go. Even more than that, every time I focus on my zone of genius and get out of the way and do the very few things I'm good at and delegate to others, I'm ready for that next level of growth. One way that I could help you is with Servosity. We co-manage your backups and disaster recovery so you can focus on what you do best, let us do the rest. And then what we do is we test the backups every single day so you never have to worry. If you'd like to engage us or just learn more, click the link below.
I could spend weeks on end just looking at different tools and capabilities and how do you leverage them and use them. And after I kind of went through that excitement phase, then you go back to the business objective. How do we deliver something that's tangible, not just a shiny object? And then that comes back to what are you going to provide as the outcome? When you look at the outcomes as the starting point, then you can backtrack on what do we need to do to build that in. And so that was kind of the key decision maker for us is let's learn the technology that we have to deliver this for the outcome.
Hey guys, Damien Stevens, host of MSP Mindset. Today, I continue my mission to interview 100 of the fastest growing and most interesting MSPs on the planet. Let me ask you a tough question. What are you doing with AI to help your clients? I talked with Shane today, and after 24 years in business, he realized the answer was not enough. And we didn't get into the tech talk. We figured out how can we help the client? What do we need to do? And how do we get out of our own fear in our own way and take action to actually help our clients with AI? Spoiler, he views this as the largest transformation that we've ever seen, and that sitting on the sidelines would really be the worst thing we could do. If you want to make a change in your MSP that will make a difference for the future, don't miss out on our conversation. So, what made you start your company? How did you know it was time?
Well, kind of coming out of that dial-up ISP business, during that period, we were partnered up with Cisco Networks. We built a lot of our infrastructure around Cisco, and when we sold the business in early 2000, we had still a lot of those relationships with Cisco. And after about 6 months of not really having a next step or next direction, Cisco had reached out to us and said, "Hey, would you be willing to sit down and kind of talk about some ideas we have?" And after talking with our rep, one of the things he mentioned was that at that point in time, IP telephony, or what we refer to as VoIP today, that was a developing technology, and they were looking for partners in that arena. And they wanted to team us up with Southwestern Bell, which was the local telco at the time, back before they merged with AT&T. And their idea was to help us connect with them. Southwestern Bell was looking to expand their sale of, IP telephony equipment and infrastructure solutions. And it was just a great fit. We loved the technology and being able to implement it and deliver those services. And for Southwestern Bell, it was a good joint partnership because they couldn't scale and grow that area fast enough in our market. So that's kind of what launched into our, the VAR side of the business that we originally started this with. So
at what point did you see the managed services horizon coming or decide to adopt that?
Yeah, the first really 10 years of our operations, we started this company in July of 2000. And, the first 5 or 6 years, it was really all around Cisco infrastructure, IP telephony, working that partnership with Southwestern Bell. Around that, I want to say 2006 timeframe, it was when AT&T merged with Southwestern Bell. At that point in time, they said, no more of that outsourcing. We want that revenue ourselves. So we brought on our own sales force at that point to go out and sell the infrastructure ourselves. And at that point in time, up until probably 2010 timeframe, if it didn't have a Cisco logo on it, we didn't touch it. We stepped over all kinds of server work and even some network infrastructure. If it didn't have Cisco involved, we didn't touch it, which was good and bad. I was naive at the time and kind of thought, we're really building value with Cisco. They'll see that partnership that we're exclusive to them and value it. And you realize over time that you're just a cog in the wheel. And from that perspective, early 2010, after the economy kind of took a tank, that's when everyone was revamping, saying, okay, where do we go from here? And that's when we really started looking at how do we expand on what we're doing and move out of that VAR space. Because the crazy thing is, in 2008, I mean, we still had a ton of project work in the backlog at the beginning of 2008. By the end of 2008, after the economy kind of went belly up, or not kind of, majorly went belly up, that dwindled to where people just weren't spending on capital expenditures at that point in time. And so that's really what kind of started that thought process. And by 2010, we had made the decision, we've got to branch out. And managed services was one of those areas that, we were always a little nervous to go down that route, just because we had our specialty. We were the guys when it came to Cisco infrastructure, and this kind of spread us out into areas we weren't as comfortable with. But you learn as you go along, and you grow with it, and it's kind of what happened with us. And by 2011, that was kind of the full direction of the company at that point in time.
Okay. And so tell me about that evolution. Sounds like you got really big at some point into automation.
So yeah, when we branched out into the managed service space, early 2010, 2011 timeframe, the industry was really just kind of feeling out, where does it go from here? And we joined some of the programs that were out there. True Methods was one of the ones that we started in. I think that was one of their starting years almost when we signed on with them. But like most people, we bought the program, didn't do a whole lot with it, and said, oh, well, we can pick and choose what we want to do out of this. And kind of just felt like we'd figure our own way through that. And it wasn't really until the 2016 timeframe when we really got serious about it. But, automation didn't really come into play until a little later through the MSP building phase. It was really all about, who do we want to be? How do we want to deliver services? And who is going to be the right client? And how do we figure out the mechanics of that to make it happen?
How long did that take you to figure out?
Well, we're still figuring out. This is a ever evolving industry.
Right.
But having said that, one of the things we realized, you mentioned that I realized that I was building a lifestyle business. Where it was just, make enough to feel like you're in control of things, but not really understanding or seeing that what you're putting into this day after day really should be about building an asset as opposed to just providing income. And so I would say as I got into, 2013 was a pivotal year for me, simply because my father-in-law owned 16 different businesses, was an incredibly successful businessman.
Wow.
Anything from real estate to tourism, just guy did it all. And he was kind of my mentor. And in 2013, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Diagnosed in May, passed away in October.
Wow.
So yeah, it's one of those things that, and it's just one of those things that he was the guy that I looked to when it came to business, when it came to family. And so at the end of 2013, really even through the 2014 time period, it was just really kind of trying to figure out, where do we go from here? And that was when I was looking at the fact that, am I building something or am I just generating an income for myself? And in 2016 was when we said, okay, I've got to do something different. We all spend way too much time building these types of businesses for it just to be income. Mm-hmm. This is a high stress industry. It is a challenging industry. It's a competitive industry. And if you're going to put in that much work, it should be generating a longer term result for you. And so that's when we started looking at, how do we turn this into building an asset as opposed to just operating a business. And through that process, we were part of True Methods, but at that point in time, we said, we've got to do something really to make this take off and scale. And so we joined their Winner Circle peer group. I'd actually been messaging Gary Pica probably a year or more about, hey, do you have access? Can we get into this program? And finally, they opened it up a little more. And still to this day, I've got some of the connections we made through that are, some of my best friends, the people that I look to as mentors and folks that help guide me along each and every day.
I want to go back to what you said earlier about I realized I was building a lifestyle business and I needed to build an asset.
Yeah.
That was me for way too long. So can you unpack what that even means? Because I think for too long I was sitting there going, it's a business either way.
Yeah. And I think we, as business owners, especially when we start out, we're thinking, okay, I want to do something that I can set my own hours and drive my own income, and I'm not beholden to anyone else but myself. And we realize over the course of time that we're still, we may have our name on the check when it goes out to all the expenses, but we're still answering to someone. We're still answering to our clients as we should. We still can't set our own hours for the most part. We get some perks that you can work around that, but if you're at the point where you're working in the business as opposed to working on the business, you're still in that same scenario. And year after year, I'd look at it and say, okay, well, what did we make this year? And was it enough to support what I want to do in my life? And it was at the time. I had young kids at that point in time, and it allowed me freedom to go to their ball games and their activities and nice vacations. But at the end of the day, we got to look at beyond that. And that's what it came down to is I look at what my father-in-law had built, and everything he built turned into an asset. Something that even after he passed away, survived for his family. And that's one of the things it was kind of a turning point for me that what I'm doing should be building value so that at some point, I'm not going to want to do this forever. And my family needs to be able to reap the rewards as well. And so it should be building that asset that provides that long-term value. And it's just a mind shift change that, things is something as simple as looking at your expenses. If you spend $1,000 today, it's $1,000 expense. But if you were to look at what that $1,000 represents in an exit, and you're getting a 6 or 8x, return on your profitability, well, that $1,000 really represents $6,000 to $8,000. And changing that mindset to where you're looking at the operations through that lens, it was a tough transition, but one that we knew was necessary.
And how long would you say that transition took?
It really, like I say, was, of course, part of the peer group conversation. When we started sitting at the table with other CEOs that were further along, when we started having mentors come to those, those quarterly meetings that were way further along than we were, and then they start talking to you about, where are you at? Where do you want to be? That probably is a 2-year time period from when we first started till it really sunk in that, hey, this is not just about generating income, and you really got to be looking more long term, and it changes the way you approach things. I know when I first started going to peer group meetings, and someone would ask me, well, "What do you hope to get out of your business?" Or they would ask if have you ever thought about selling your business, and if so, what would you look to get out of it? Before going to the peer groups, I was thinking, well, man, if I could get $1 million out of this business, that would be incredible. And then you sit down at the table with other folks, and they're like, okay, let's talk through that. You get $1 million. What are you going to pay out in taxes? And then, what are you going to have to legal fees and closing costs? And then what are you going to end up with? And what are you going to do for the rest of your life? Then all of a sudden you're like, well, man, that doesn't make a bit of sense.
Yeah.
So I owe a lot of where we are to those conversations.
Really good conversations to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to go back to the days building your MSP. It sounds like you leaned into automation a ton, and then I think we even talked about RPA.
Yeah, so when we first started playing around with automation, it goes back to, we were an early lab tech adopter. And I remember, speaking of conferences, going to, the ConnectWise conference, probably, now 15 years ago, maybe not that long, but, and talking with some of the lab tech engineers there and just looking at all of the automation capabilities. And that's one of the things that, even early in my career, the thing that fascinated me most about technology was leveraging automation to deliver that efficiency and cut down on the time required. And so I always had that eye to kind of look for how do we how do we eliminate a lot of the manual process, and how do we leverage automation? Today, obviously, it's an entirely different landscape when it comes to automation, beyond just your traditional RMM package. I think that's where we all probably started, was leveraging the RMM, whether that was lab tech or whatever the RMM of choice was. Now there's so many more options for managed service providers, not just in our community. You've got PIA and you've got Roost. Those are the ones that we know about, but there's other options outside of our community that come into play. And really looking at how you take advantage of that to analyze every manual process that you have internally. How do you look at time invested? What are the positions that you can streamline and make more valuable so they have more time to focus on more productive tasks? Even to the point that you look at, or we do anyway, look at automation as a way to eliminate our tool stack. Prime example is years ago, any tool that we were looking at bringing into our operation was all based upon how does it integrate with every other tool we have. And we would buy tools based upon that. And we look for more functionality, so we go buy another tool. Now our mindset has changed to the position of what has an open API that we can leverage automation and build our functionality as opposed to going and buying another tool.
That's very different mindset. And especially with the open API and building it, have you felt that there was some upskilling on your team, or you needed to bring in some developers? I know most MSPs are more comfortable with kind of no code, low code, just turning a few knobs. What do you recommend, and what's your experience been there?
Well, when we first started getting into it, we knew that it was going to require some significant investment in man hours. It goes back to when we first signed on with Cisco. We were one of the first partners in our area to get the IP telephony partner certification, but it's because we knew we had to make the investment. And so for the first 2 months, all we did was send guys to training. And so we kind of took that same mindset with automation. So we dedicated a couple of folks internally and said, here's what we want you to go through in terms of training and platform so that you gain the expertise. We're going to dedicate the time to do that. And it's one of those things that you're not going to be able to just dabble at. If you want to be good at it anyway, you got to dedicate the time and invest in the training, invest in the tools, and invest in more importantly, the time it takes. In terms of outside of that, one of the other things we always look at is, are there partners that we can work with? And we've made really good connections in the industry so that if we ever run into a scenario where this is outside of our wheelhouse, we've got some partners that we can go to that probably can fill those gaps. And I think that's with any technology that you bring in, is you want to make sure that you're experts in what you do, but you also want to have partners in other areas that can fill those gaps if you can't.
Absolutely. So I wanted to get your thoughts on AI, and I want to start with this kind of question, which is, do you see AI as the thing that we should see as opportunity, the thing we should see as a threat? How do we let's just attack that from a business owner perspective. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, well, most of the folks that know me will tell you that I'm very high on AI and the capabilities, and more importantly, the potential that it has. Starting in the industry almost 30 years ago, there were phases of technology that were really exciting. The .com boom, I'm old enough to say I was part of that, and seeing how that all developed. It's one of those things that was really exciting to be a part of. And I really feel like over the last 5 to 7 years, technology, for me anyway, had gotten to a point where it was kind of stale and not as exciting. I don't know if it's just because I'm getting older or the technology wasn't as exciting. AI changes that. I really feel like AI is that next pivotal moment when it comes to technology and how it's going to drive our operations in almost every aspect of our lives. And the thing is that it's at such a fast pace. We've never seen a technology advance and change as quickly as this is changing. So I see it as a tremendous opportunity for our industry. I'm sure most everyone in this space is getting asked questions about it. They're probably having to deal with some tools that are out there. There's obviously security concerns when it comes to compliance and how that's all handled. But I think that's a way for us as managed service providers and in this industry to bring value that our clients actually see and want at this point in time. For 3 or 4 years, cybersecurity was the big one, and we all want all of our clients to be concerned about cybersecurity and to take it seriously. But at the end of the day, it's something that people don't like to talk about. They don't want to have to worry about. And it's not exciting for the end user or end business owner. That's AI right. And the automations that go along with it, I think that is something that sparks a lot of conversations and drives a lot of value.
So you see more opportunity than threat, at least for yourself in the business landscape?
I think it's all in perception and the way you look at it. There's obviously threats because what we use for productivity and legitimate opportunities, threat actors and criminals can use for malicious activities. But it's not a technology that you can ignore anymore. It's funny. I was just scrolling through Facebook over the weekend and saw, I kind of monitor the AI posts that are out there and the ads and everything. And you can't find an AI post out there that doesn't have someone with an angry face and this whole hate message about how it's going to destroy the economy and destroy our world. But it's not like it's something that's going to stop. That's what's amusing to me is that just because you don't like it or just because you're scared of it or just because you don't understand it, it's not going to stop. And so when it comes to the threat side of it, I think, every business owner needs to educate themselves on what the potential is, what the risks are, and how do you mitigate and manage that and use it effectively. And that's where I feel like that, the pace that it's coming at us, everyone needs to be looking at it. So to answer your question, yes, there are threats. I think you need to be aware of it. I think you need to mitigate as best as possible, just like with any security threat. But it's something that I think you can use to your advantage to bring value, to be that advocate for your client, and drive solutions for it that bring value to what you do as a managed service provider.
So I want to dig more into that, but before I do, how are the clients seeing this as more of a threat, more of an opportunity, more of just things are changing too fast, I give up? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, and we kind of see 3 different camps on it right now. We see the one camp that's looking at it and they're excited because they played with some tools and they want to, what can you do to help us with this? And we want to do Copilot and ChatGPT and all of the stuff that they're bringing to you. They're excited. They just don't understand how to go about it. That's the first camp. The other camp is we hate it. It's going to destroy business. It's going to cause us to fire employees. It's going to be the death of civilization. And they're totally against it. And then the third camp is probably the biggest that we see, and it's more of we don't understand it yet, and we don't know what to do with it yet. And so we're waiting on someone to tell us and lead us. Mm-hmm. And that's where we see most of when we're talking to clients, that's where we see most of the people sitting today. And I think that's going to change over the next 6 to 12 months.
So as a technologist, it's easy to jump in, and we're going to talk about how we can help the people that see the opportunity now. But what do we do now? Where should we as an MSP be in that conversation, especially with the people that are concerned about it, or maybe the third camp that just, I don't know what to do?
Yeah. And it's a good question because it's like any technology. As you look at what's being brought to you, if you had people coming to you years ago about Internet of Things, it was the same type of thing. How do we go about, how do we leverage, what is the advantage? And you either have to decide we're going to become an expert in that and help educate our client base around that, or we're going to have to find partners that can help us with that. But we still want to be that pivot point for our clients. And that's one of the things we look at with our clients is the biggest thing we can do for them is help educate and help them understand what the technology is, what it does, what's the reality versus the marketing hype that's out there, what are the risk and liability when it comes to compliance and those security concerns, and really how do they position themselves to take advantage of this in the coming years.
So as an MSP, where do you start with this?
Well, the first thing is, having conversations. I would imagine most of the audience that listens to the podcast does some form of quarterly or semi-annual meetings with their clients. It's an excellent opportunity to talk about what are you doing around this? How much do you know about it? Or do you have questions about it? How are you leveraging it? How are you controlling it? Start with those conversations, find out what they need, what they want, and then look at what you can deliver upon that. And then that's where you build that strategy around it. Like I say, it's no different than any other technology that we've brought into play for our clients. You go to like the SOC offerings. When that became a play, you either had to decide, are we going to build a SOC internally, or are we going to outsource and partner with someone else? And you got to make that decision based upon what you feel like you can invest in time and resources, and where you want to be the expert.
Mm-hmm. That makes a ton of sense. Speaking of that, it sounds like you've really invested heavily in this, in AI.
We have. For us, this all kind of goes back to post-COVID. We invested in some marketing campaigns to, like everyone else, we wanted to grow and scale. We were looking at how do we build this asset. And so we invested in some marketing assets and programs to help us do just that. And part of that was the realization that, we don't have the man hours right now to do everything that needs to be done. And so we started looking at hiring on a marketing admin to come in and help us. And like most people, post-COVID, we went through the whole challenges around the lack of talent when it came to the candidates applying for positions. And for almost 6 months, we didn't get a qualified candidate apply for this marketing admin position. And all the while, our costs are coming in month after month after month. We're falling further and further behind. And, I got to the point where, okay, I'm spending the money on this. I'm not getting anywhere close to a return on it. Either I have to cut the spend, or we've got to look at how do we solve this in other ways. And for us, that was looking at how do we automate? How do we bring AI into the mix? And through, the automation platforms and some of the built-in tools we had, we were able to take what we were going to look at bringing in a dedicated person for, and handle 90% of those tasks through automation and AI. And that was kind of the light bulb moment for me that said, okay, if we can do this for this position, what can we do in other positions? Mm-hmm. What can we do in other areas of our operations? And so, at the end of last year, 2023, when we were going into our annual planning for this year, that's one of the things we looked at is, do we invest in this? And I spent probably a good month going through pros and cons and how much is going to be required. Did a lot of research, and at that point in time, there wasn't a whole lot out there to say, here's a path. Like with Cisco, you have hey, you want to be an IP telephony partner? Here's your training path, and the timeline to expect. With this, there's just not a lot of that developed yet. So we made the determination. I made the determination that this is an opportunity that I feel like is critical. It's something that, number one, it excites me. It's that area of technology that I feel like really brings value, and it's something that I've got a passion for. So we made the investment at the beginning of the year that we're going to learn as much as we can about it, develop offerings around it, and make sure that we can deliver it to our clients. And so that kind of started the ball rolling, and this entire last year has been all about how do we help further this in terms of our offering and our knowledge and our skills and capabilities.
And what's your team's reaction to that? Has that been like excitement, overwhelm, something else?
I think it varies by personality type, right? Because we've got those individuals, and I'm sure everyone does, that you throw a new technology and they're all for it. They want to learn as much as they can. I've got others that, having more they view it as more responsibility, more things I have to learn. And so that was a key component for us, was when we went into our annual plan and annual meeting, I laid out, here's where I think this has the potential to go. And I understand what the concerns are, and I want to hear all aspects, what concerns you, what are you excited about, and let's determine if this is going to be a way to go. And it wasn't an overnight thing that everyone was on board. Some on our team thought, well, it's just a marketing term that's being thrown out. And some cases that is, they're, same functionality, they're just saying is AI now. But as we started working through it and they started seeing the internal automations that we brought into play and the efficiencies that it brought, then they started getting, questions from our client base. Now I feel like we're at a point where everyone sees, okay, this is a huge advantage. It's something that our clients see value in, and something that they look to us for guidance and expertise on. So we need to have this in our wheelhouse.
And if I understand, you decided to have this as a separate brand.
Not initially. It's one of those things that, new technology, we got to learn it and we got to bring it into practice for our existing clients and build the expertise. And so we started down that path. Initially, it was all about how do we use AI and automation internally, which I think is where most MSPs are looking at. But then as we started talking with clients, we saw that there's an opportunity for clients to implement this technology. And this is a new revenue opportunity, a new project opportunity. How do we bring that to the table for them? And then as we kind of went further down that path and talking with other MSPs, they're like, oh, yeah, we'd love to get into that, but just don't know that we want to dedicate the time and money into this right now. And so then after we had some discussions with them, we said, is there a reason that you wouldn't look at this? And they said, well, the exact same thing, the investment side of it. And so we looked at it kind of like the way they did with their SOC offering. Maybe it's something that they could leverage a third-party partner, a trusted partner. And so, we decided to, after reviewing all of that, to launch a separate company just focused on AI and automation, and open up the ability to partner with other MSPs to provide that as a service through them, so that they build that stickiness and that value with their customer, but they don't have to invest in all the resources internally to deliver that. So we launched that second company, like I say, about a month and a half ago.
So let's get real here. What are the opportunities? What are people really paying for? And is this more than reselling Copilot or ChatGPT?
Well, I think there's a couple of different perspectives on that, because I've seen people, really focused on Copilot, and that's a direction. I'm not saying that that's invalid. We chose a little different direction where we're looking at the automation as kind of that base layer. AI is layered on top of that. I always kind of say, automation is the campfire wood, whereas AI is the lighter fluid you put on it. And there's nothing wrong with going after the Copilot, the ChatGPT perspective. We're looking at it more of a way to bring automation as a whole to deliver process automation, not just point solutions. And so that's where we see the most potential, because a lot of the stuff that we get into may not have a component of AI in it at all. It may just be an automation play. Mm-hmm. And so that's where we look at this as, hey, this is the building ground. Let's look at automation first, layer AI on top of it if we need it. But there's a much bigger opportunity for technology providers to look at bringing automation as a whole, as opposed to point solutions with just an AI platform.
Mm-hmm. So are you late? Are you really in the early majority? Is it 18 months from now? When is the time for, let's just stick with AI, automation with AI?
That's a tough question. I mean, I'd love to say that we're early adopters and early to the game, but the pace at which this technology is advancing and changing makes me question that at times. In terms of what we see in the community of people building a practice around it, I think we're probably early adopters. But in terms of the technology itself, I feel like we're probably middle of the road right now, and struggling to say, how do we learn as much as we can and keep up as quickly as we can. Mm-hmm. In talking with folks, I'm not seeing a whole lot of people doing this yet in terms of a specific offering. So from that aspect, I'd say we're a little ahead. But I think we all have to be looking at it as, how do we provide this, and do we do it ourselves, or do we outsource or partner?
Mm. Well, speaking of that, for every MSP that's probably has that same question, what I love about AI is if you don't like it, just wait, right? It'll change at a pace faster than we've ever seen. But it's also the thing that I have an issue with, because it's the ultimate shiny object. So if I think I should spend some time on it, then you could spend seemingly infinite amount of your time, your staff's time. So how did you think about, what do we need to do to invest time because it'd be different if you were like, hey, I just went and raised a pile of investor money and started a new business and, I bet it all on black. But you have a real business and a growing business, and you had to make probably a very real trade-off decision.
Yep. Yeah, and that's a good question. In the early part of the year, it was pretty much the whole scattered. What's out there? What do we do? How do we learn this? And you're right. I could spend weeks on end just looking at different tools and capabilities and how do you leverage them and use them. And after I kind of went through that excitement phase, then you go back to the business objective. How do we deliver something that's tangible, not just a shiny object? And then that comes back to what are you going to provide as the outcome? Mm-hmm. And when you look at the outcomes as the starting point, then you can backtrack on what do we need to do to build that in. And so that was kind of the key, decision maker for us is let's learn the technologies that we have to deliver this for the outcome versus what's the latest and greatest. And you have to stay up and learn as these tools evolve and change and new features are added. And but I think you have to make that decision. Okay, here, what are the core concepts that we need to bring in house? How much time do we dedicate? Do we dedicate people or do we dedicate hours? Do we dedicate both? But you got to make that decision. You're going to dedicate something out of that, and you got to determine what that return on that is and what your goal is around it.
How much pushback was from your team? Like, I understand you have to do that. Ultimately, that was your decision, but I'm curious how much was shaped by, I can see some people saying, I want to put this down and pick this shiny object up. And I can see others having just the opposite based on personality and workload and all the other things. You're
spot on. And personality drives a lot of it. But one of the things we did starting out was we dedicated specific days for training time around this. We knew the individual we felt would be best suited for this. We blocked out days just for training. Then we added in days just for implementation. And now we actually have dedicated members that have dedicated time and process around this. Internally as a company, we follow the EOS framework. And in our level 10 meetings, we have a discussion. We have our leadership L10 meeting weekly. And we have a dedicated section of that just around what do we want to look at in terms of automation. And we use Canny to kind of promote those ideas and present it to the team, and everyone gets to vote on what they feel like is the most impactful use of that time. And so we try to make it collaborative internally. In the early days, it was really just me and the two automation engineers saying, here's what we want to do. Tell us what you would like to automate. And we didn't get a whole lot of feedback probably for almost 2 months. But as they started seeing what we were rolling out and what could be done, now we're at a point where people are bringing automations. We've got an entire list of suggested automations. We've got a specific work board for that to where we can kind of rank those. And our goal with this is we'll never get all of those items addressed, but we want to address the most impactful ones, both internally for our operations as well as our clients, to help them get an idea of what are the highest ROI items that they can leverage out of this so that you focus on automating the right things.
So folks that aren't familiar with Canny, tell what that brought to it instead of just you and your two engineers.
So if you're not familiar with Canny, it's a development lifecycle tool that helps people see what's being rolled out and schedules for that. And probably the biggest component for us was the ability for our team to vote. One of the things we learned from others in the automation journey is you need to have someone that's the champion that helps say, yes, we want to automate and build a practice around this, but you really have to have input from others. The champion can't be the one pushing what the automations are because they've got one viewpoint. The people who are in the trenches doing the work, they need to have a voice in this. And so that's what Canny does. It gives us that ability to where there's visibility into what's suggested, what the outputs are, the timelines are, and they get to have votes on what they feel is going to be the best and next choice for automation. So it gave them that voice, and it wasn't something that was pushed down from me.
I love the giving them that voice and having a say in what's going on, and especially once they started to see a few things happen, it becomes a little more real. your initial, I guess you call them automation engineers. I'm curious. I see that like at one point when you were VAR, you probably had a ton of networking guys, and then, a lot of MSPs calling in more server or cloud guys. And, but in my experience, those are usually different than software developers. So, depending on how you're using AI, you might want software developers. If you're getting into the code, you might want low code, no code, just tinkerer. So less about a label, but I'm curious, like, how did you identify those folks that you wanted to start with, and what kind of skill sets were you looking for?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's one of those areas that, even going back to the VAR days when we were doing Cisco, there were people that were security focused. You could just tell that they were security guys. We're going to throw them at it. Then there were guys that were switch guys. I was more on the switch side than security. I just wasn't that detail oriented at that point in time. Mm-hmm. So there's that mindset that you can kind of see. Now, the same thing applies with this. And it's interesting because this is the first year that we're seeing automation engineer as a title inside of companies at this point. I'm sure that they've been there before, but the first time I've really taken notice of it. And so as we've gone to some of the conferences, done some of the research, we've looked at what makes a good automation engineer. And you're right, a lot of it has that software development background, the coding background, the person that loves being in that environment. And that's one of the key factors that we used in selecting who we felt like would be the right engineers on our team to dedicate to this. And I think having a development background helps. It's different than network infrastructure and server management. You've got to be one for details. You've got to be one that loves to think logically and visually. Being able to put that together is a unique skill set.
Yeah. Well, speaking of skill sets, it sounds like you've always been an automation guy and KPIs guy. So is that why your take on AI is not all things AI, but focused on automation and actually driving some kind of business outcome?
Yeah, I think without automation, it's just kind of what you pointed out, it's shiny object syndrome. And everyone's going to approach it on their own. That's the danger. One of the dangers with AI is that without a unified approach from the corporate company level down, you have the risk that people are going out and doing things that may or may not be beneficial or could be harmful to you. But if you look at it from an automation perspective, what do we automate and how do we do that and what tools do we use? That changes that perspective to where it's not people doing individual tasks with AI. It changes it to where here as a company, here's what we want to drive and the tools that it's going to require to do that. And so approaching it from that perspective has always kind of been, my thought process. And again, like you mentioned, I've always looked at automation as just a huge component of technology. Even when I was doing, just for simple marketing tasks, before we really even got into this, it's always, how do we automate this? How do we get more data? Because that's another component. For the last 8 years, been highly driven by KPIs and data, because I feel like the data tells you the story. You may need to dig in and find out the details, but the data tells the story and it doesn't lie. And using automation in conjunction with that, I think, is the key for most organizations to see the most impact from this.
Would you say there's more opportunity right now, or are you in one camp or the other where you're either doing nothing, which is probably not you with AI, only looking at the upside and kind of rose-colored glasses, but or kind of trying to, for lack of a better way, hedge your bets? In other words, because you could always invest more time and resources, but then, the next model update or the next whatever, maybe that investment wasn't necessary or it isn't necessary any longer. I don't think we've ever dealt with anything that's changed this rapidly. So I'd love your take on how we as humans, not AI models, cope with this just unprecedented pace of change.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because, like you say, it's something we haven't experienced before in terms of the pace and the capabilities, even more so. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's something that you can bury your head in the sand on and just say, well, I'm never going to adopt it. You may have done that with security. You may have done that with, virtualization back in the early days, and it always plays out that you're going to have to adopt it at some point. But the issue I see with taking that approach with this is the pace, because if you miss out now, I feel like you're going to always be playing catch up, and it's going to happen so much quicker at this point in time. Just because, as you mentioned, the stuff is changing daily. The closest thing that I can think of in comparison is kind of the .com boom, and I mean, that took us 10 years for people to go from, hey, what is the internet and how do we get a website, to people, it just becoming a norm. This is something that I think will happen in, months as opposed to years.
Interesting. And do you see the opportunity now in basically some form of cost avoidance, meaning automating, for example, a process to reduce costs for your clients? Do you see the opportunity in some way to drive revenue or lead generation or something that ultimately leads in more business? Or are those tied together?
I think where most organizations are starting is in the cost savings aspect. And simply because if you can get started with something that gives you an immediate return by saving you money, people can see that, as tangible, it's real, we can do it. But I also think there's a tremendous opportunity for new capabilities, being more competitive, driving innovation through leveraging these technologies. But that's something that's a little more fluid, that's not concrete for people to see. A lot of times that's, blue sky. And I feel like looking at it from a cost savings perspective, I've not met an organization yet in our discussions around this and the sales process that there isn't a level of cost savings that can be driven through this. You show them that piece of it and they see how it works, and you eliminate some of the fear around it. Then it becomes more of a talking area that you can say, okay, now that you see how this works, how can you be more competitive in your space? How can you drive an advantage for your clients? How can you bring a new offering to your client base that drives just that much more value in your services? And it really starts that mindset moving towards, let's leverage this because it is something real and tangible.
We do have an opportunity, though, which is interesting. And I'm curious, because as MSPs, I think it's been more, let's proactively manage your IT. And then, maybe we'll be your VCIO or CISO or something, which is interesting. And now folks are saying I could play an even larger role. So should we just be talking about reducing your existing cost? Should we be talking about your innovation? Should we be saying, hey, you're in this vertical, I think it's going to be changed rapidly. Do you want to be, one of the early adopters or the early majority or late majority or laggard or that sort of thing? What do you think are the right fit for us as MSPs and having these conversations with clients?
And that's an interesting perspective because, AI, while it's an incredible tool, we also have to look at how does it affect our industry as well. It's one of those thoughts that's run through my head over the last year. Clients come to us, and because one of the things that sets us apart is the way we serve our clients and the capabilities that we bring. But what happens if that becomes something that they can solve 50%, 60% of those issues through an AI platform? What value do you bring from that perspective? I'm not saying that will happen, but it's something everyone needs to be considering. Yeah. I think as providers in the technology space, this is an incredible opportunity for us to move from the what's quickly becoming a commodity service. Everyone's saying a lot of the same things. Everyone's saying they do VCIO. Everyone's saying that they have great customer service. And I'm sure they do. And so how do you move beyond that to where you're no longer a commodity, to where now you're actually providing a value-added, trusted partner, which we all want to get to, where we're part of helping our clients grow. There's tangible value there. I think it's something that every MSP should be looking at. And like I say, you go back to the SOC offering. You have to make that decision. Are we going to invest in this? Are we going to do this? And if so, what's it going to require? And let's go all in. Or do we partner with someone and build that relationship so we have the partnership? But either way, either direction, I don't think you can sit by on the sidelines. I think it's going to be crucial for every MSP to be evaluating how do we take that next leap to bring value to our clients.
Really good points there, Shane. So I want to switch gears for a moment. What's the biggest lesson that you've learned over all of these years in business?
Biggest lesson. Probably knowing your KPIs. And that's something that in the early days, I was like, oh, yeah, you need to know your numbers. I get it. But really knowing your numbers, I think, is key, because I think a mistake that I made early in my career in the MSP space is saying, oh, yeah, I know what our operations should look like. I know what we should be doing in terms of service. But until we started getting KPIs assigned to every role in the company and really understanding what those KPIs are and why they should be what they are, we really didn't have visibility on how to grow and scale. I think when you operate as a small MSP under 10 employees, which we did for years, it's easy for everyone to just do whatever needed to be done at any given time. And did you work hard today? Did you put in a lot of hours? Yeah, so it was a good day. But as you grow and scale and you get dedicated roles and positions, in order to scale that, there has to be expectations around those roles. There has to be measurements there. And for me as a business owner, I had to know, why do we need those numbers? What do those numbers mean? They help me predict and scale and know when I need to hire and what is good performance for any given day. So that's probably one of the biggest aspects that was a learning experience for me.
If there's one thing you could do over or do differently, what would that be?
Man, you're asking some good questions. Probably, if I had one do-over, it would be to realize the importance of investing in sales and marketing, and coming at that from, again, a process-driven mindset. It's not just about, hey, let's run some ads, or hey, let's hire a salesperson, which is the easy thing. I think coming at it with a unified approach. I think we all kind of start out sales coming from referral and word of mouth, which is, I think, the number one, in the surveys I've seen, still the number one way people get clients in our industry, and realizing that that's not the way the rest of the industry scale and grow. It's not the way our industry scales and grow. You really need a process and dedicate the time and effort to learning what that needs to be, and it's something I'm still doing to this day.
That's really, really good. I think it's easy to miss that process of sales and marketing, especially when I've met so many of us that we know we got to get out of our business. We move from being the tech to having the techs. And then we think we're great when we're moving into automation, which is great. We automate those processes, but then we still end up being the only link in sales and marketing. We often end up being owner-led sales, referral-driven, and getting finally to this layer where I think some of us don't even pick our heads up to think about, because we're like, oh, you've automated so many of the technical pieces are driven KPIs or operational maturity.
That's right. And it's an interesting space, because I've talked to people outside of our industry, and one of the questions that always comes up is, from a sales and growth perspective, why is our industry so sold on the idea that it has to be owner-led sales? You look at the guys that are at the top, and I know you've talked to a lot of them. It's not owner-led sales. When you're getting to $100 million, $150, $200 million a year in sales, that you have a sales process with a sales team. And there's a switch, and there's a point where you've got to say, okay, we've got to have a process for this too. We're still learning that ourselves.
Yeah, it takes, if you haven't gone through it, it takes a little longer than you think to get to figure that out, right? What's a myth about running an MSP that you'd like to dispel?
All revenue is good revenue. And it's one that I fought for years, and it's one of those things that you're thinking, and it's not even just about pricing things correctly. It's about, is that going to be a good client for you? I've still got clients now that I took on in the early years that, man, it's just a fight every single day to get them to spend what they need to do, not just spend what they need to do, but actually follow process. We're a very process-driven organization. Every department has their own process that they follow. Everything that we do, our mantra is either follow a process or document a process in everything you do. But if our clients don't follow that, man, it's just headbutting all the time. And getting to the point where you can look at revenue coming in. It's not the money that comes in, it's the relationship that you build and what you make of that relationship that is the real value, not just the invoice that goes out.
Well said.
Hard lesson.
What's something with all this change, with all the things going on, that you're looking forward to, Shane?
Well, it's got to be, like I say, this is the first time in years that I've really been excited about where technology is leading us. I think what we're going to see in the transition to automation and AI capabilities and technology really is going to change our way of doing business and way of doing life more dramatically than anything we've ever seen. You go back and you look at the iPhone and when it came out, that was just incredible. You go back to what that first iPhone was and what we thought about it then versus where we are today. I think it's going to dwarf that just because, again, the capabilities that are coming, I'm using it more and more every day. It's sparking more ideas, more concepts of what can be done. That's one of the things that excites me, the most. Cybersecurity is one of those things that happened for years that we had to do. To me, it was frustrating because people didn't see the value, but you had to do it. This is something that I think, man, when people see the potential, this is going to fire them up about where we go as a society and as in business and everything else in our lives.
Why is it so exciting to you?
Looking at what it brings in terms of capabilities, everything we do, if we come right down to it, what we build a business for, what we invest in, what we drive in returns to bring money back to our families is all about how do we spend more time with our loved ones, our family, and enjoy the short time that we have here on this earth. And the more that we can do to bring value, more of that to allow us to spend more quality time, the better. And so I'm a huge proponent of that. Anything that allows me to be more efficient, to drive more return on the time so that I get more time with my family and loved ones, I'm all in on.
A great answer. What's the number one book you'd recommend?
I'm a serial reader, so I've probably got half a dozen that I would recommend. Obviously, Think and Grow Rich is my top one, just because I think from the mindset perspective, understanding that, and I've read through it, I think 4 different times now, and also listened to it on audio. I do a lot of my books on audio. That's got to be the top one. Probably closely behind that is The Power of One More by Ed Mylett. And it kind of builds upon that whole mindset and who you surround yourself with, and your perception of yourself drives your outcome. So those would be probably one of the top 2. I could go on and on because, like I say, I love to read. I love to listen to audiobooks. It's something I've got 3 different books I'm listening to at the moment.
How has either of those made an impact on you?
I guess in the last probably 2 to 3 years, the mindset aspect, we all get so buried in our day-to-day activities. Like I say, this is a challenging industry. It's not easy. It can be stressful. And if you don't manage that and stay on top of that mindset, you can get sucked into kind of a downward spiral. You look at the power the mind has on all aspects of our lives. I mean, there's been studies proving that the wrong mindset can actually have negative physical aspects on your health, and managing that is huge. And so for me, the last 2 years, I've been trying to invest as much effort and time I can into focusing on that mindset. And it provides returns, financially as well as business, but more importantly, health and mental well-being.
It's a huge change when you change your mindset.
Right.
Change your health, change all of those things. That's a dramatic change.
Absolutely.
Well, Shane, for those that would love to connect with you, find you online, what is the best way to find you?
Best way to find me is on LinkedIn, and I'm assuming you'll probably have some details in the post here. LinkedIn's great. Email, you can reach me at Shane@dazzee, DAZZEE.com, or Shane@innovativeautomations.ai.
Wonderful. make sure to take Shane up on that offer. Shane, this has been an amazing gift, and I thank you for being on MSP Mindset.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. As I told you before, it's been an enjoyable conversation anytime we can connect, and always looking to connect with other people in the industry and share ideas and stories.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.